Clayton had lived on his small ranch for many years, and during that time, he had learned to enjoy the quiet life. Each morning, he woke up before sunrise, fed the horses, checked the fences, and walked across the fields with his old hat tilted low over his eyes. The land was peaceful, the sky wide and open, and the only sounds were the wind moving through the grass and the soft steps of his boots on the dusty ground. He liked this simple routine. It kept his mind clear and his heart steady. On this particular day, the weather was calm. The sun was beginning to set, spreading warm light across the land as Clayton finished his work for the evening. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, stretched his tired back, and started walking toward the house. His stomach growled faintly. He had planned to cook something warm once he got inside. But before he reached the porch, he noticed something strange. Someone was standing near the front gate. Clayton slowed his steps. Visitors were rare out here, especially strangers. As he got closer, he saw it was a woman. She stood quietly, almost unsure whether she should approach or turn back. The small bag in her hand looked worn, and her clothes seemed travel-stained, as if she had been on the road for a long time. Her face looked tired, yet her eyes held a soft, hopeful expression. The cowboy adjusted his hat and cleared his throat as he approached. "Evenin'," he said gently, not wanting to startle her. The woman looked up, relieved to see him. "Good evening," she replied in a soft voice. I'm sorry for coming like this. I don't want to bother you. She paused, holding her small bag tightly. "I haven't eaten properly in a few days. I was wondering if you might have some food. Anything would help." Her words were simple, but her voice trembled slightly, as if asking for help was difficult for her. Clayton was a man of few words, but he had a kind heart. He didn't like to see anyone hungry. "You're not bothering me," he said calmly. "Come on up to the porch. You look tired." The woman hesitated for a moment, almost as if she wasn't sure she deserved the offer. Then she nodded and walked slowly toward the porch. Clayton noticed that her steps were weak. She must have been walking for a long time. When she reached the porch, she sat down carefully, as if even sitting took effort. She let out a small sigh, part relief, part exhaustion. Clayton watched her for a moment, trying to understand her situation. He didn't want to ask too many questions right away. He knew that sometimes people needed time before they opened up. "I'll get you something to eat," he said as he stepped inside the house. "Thank you," she replied softly. Inside, Clayton quickly heated some soup and cut a few slices of bread. He placed everything on a tray and brought it outside. When he handed the bowl to her, she held it gently, almost with gratitude before even tasting it. As soon as she began to eat, it was clear how hungry she had been, but she ate slowly and politely, as if she didn't want to seem desperate, even though her empty stomach told a different story. Clayton sat in the chair next to her and watched the sun dip lower in the sky. The air grew cooler, and the sound of crickets began to rise. It was a peaceful setting, one he was used to, but now it felt different. The presence of a stranger brought a new kind of stillness. "What's your name?" he finally asked, keeping his tone light. "Mira," she replied between small bites. "And thank you. Truly." Clayton nodded. "I'm Clayton." For a while, neither spoke. The quiet didn't feel uncomfortable. It simply felt like two people resting after a long day, even though only one of them had been walking for miles. Clayton noticed how Mira looked at the ranch, the horses in the distance, the wooden fences, the soft glow of the lantern near the door. There was something in her eyes that wasn't just curiosity. It was something deeper, like longing or relief. It made him wonder what she had been through. "You travelin' alone?" he asked gently. She looked down at her bowl. Yes. He could tell she didn't want to say more, and he respected that. People carried stories that weren't ready to be shared right away. He didn't push her. "I hope the soup's all right," he said, changing the subject. "It's wonderful," she said with a small smile. "More than I expected." "I'm grateful." Clayton nodded again. He didn't smile easily, but something about her soft gratitude warmed him. He realized how rare it was to meet someone so polite and humble, especially in a world where many people rush through life without noticing kindness. As Mira continued eating, the cowboy studied her quietly. Her clothes were simple, but not torn. Her face was tired, but not careless. She looked like someone who had experienced hardship recently, not someone who was used to wandering. He could tell she was not simply passing by. Something had pushed her onto the road. Still, Clayton told himself not to assume anything. When someone comes asking for food, it's usually because they need exactly that food. He didn't think beyond that. He just wanted to help her through the moment. "You can rest here for a bit before moving on," he offered. "There's no rush." Mira paused, holding the spoon in her hand. Her eyes softened with relief. "Thank you. I appreciate your kindness." They sat together in the fading light. The world around them grew quieter, as if the land itself were listening to their small conversation. Clayton felt an unusual sense of calm. He had lived alone for so long that he had nearly forgotten what it felt like to share even a simple moment with someone else. As twilight deepened, Mira finished her meal and placed the bowl carefully on the tray. "This meant more to me than you know," she said. Clayton lowered his hat slightly, unsure how to respond to such sincere words. "Anyone would have done the same," he said, though he wasn't sure it was true. Many people might have ignored a stranger at their gate, but Clayton's heart didn't allow him to turn someone away, not when they were in need. A light breeze moved across the porch, lifting a bit of Mira's hair. She brushed it back gently. Clayton noticed how her eyes glistened in the lantern light, not from tears, but from something else. Something thoughtful. Something unsaid. She looked around again at the piece of the ranch, then back at the cowboy sitting quietly beside her. And in that moment, Clayton understood something deeper. Even if he couldn't put it into words, she hadn't come only looking for food. There was a deeper hunger within her. A hunger for safety. For calm. For a moment where she wasn't just surviving but breathing freely. But Clayton didn't realize how much that hunger would change both of their lives. Not yet. To him, she was simply a tired traveler seeking a warm meal and a place to rest her feet for a while. He didn't know that her story held more layers, and that her journey had led her to his ranch for reasons far more meaningful than he imagined. For now, he focused only on the present moment. A quiet porch, a grateful guest, and the soft ranch wind carrying the scent of nightfall. He didn't ask more questions. He didn't rush her story. He simply let the silence speak for both of them. And as Mira looked out at the open land, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Clayton watched the stars slowly appear in the sky as Mira rested on the porch. The evening had grown cooler, but there was something warm in the quiet moment they shared. He stood up, lit the lantern a little brighter, and placed a soft blanket near her seat just in case she felt cold. Mira looked at it, surprised by the small gesture. "You can use it if you want," he said in his steady voice. "Thank you," she replied, gently pulling the blanket around her shoulders. The fabric felt comforting, and for the first time in many days, she felt safe enough to breathe fully. Clayton sat back down, leaning against the wooden post of the porch. He didn't try to start a heavy conversation. Instead, he let the soft sounds of the ranch speak: the crickets, the distant horses, the rustling leaves. Mira listened quietly, as if the silence itself was healing her. After a few minutes, she finally spoke. "I haven't felt peace like this in a long time," she said softly. Clayton turned his head slightly. "Sometimes quiet is the best medicine," he replied. Mira nodded slowly. Her fingers touched the edge of the blanket as she looked toward the open fields stretching endlessly before them. She seemed to be gathering courage inside her, trying to decide how much she wanted to share. Clayton didn't push her. He simply waited. "You said you've been traveling alone," he said gently after a while. "Must have been a long journey." She let out a slow breath. "It has been. Longer than I expected." There was something in her tone that made Clayton listen more closely. Not curiosity, more like respect for the weight in her voice. "I don't usually ask strangers for help," she continued. "But today, I didn't have any choice." Clayton nodded once. "Happens to the best of us." Sometimes life pushes us a little too hard. Mira looked at him, almost surprised that he understood without needing details. Most people she had met in the past either judged quickly or asked too many questions, but this cowboy seemed to read emotions quietly, without invading anyone's space. "Did you grow up here?" she asked, wanting to shift the focus for a moment. "Pretty much," he replied, glancing toward the barn. "My father raised horses. My mother took care of the home. After they passed, I stayed. The land needed someone to look after it. That must be lonely sometimes," she said gently. He shrugged lightly. "Some days. Yes. But the quiet keeps my mind steady." Mira gave a small smile. "I guess we're very different. I grew up in busy places. Lots of people. Lots of noise. But none of it ever felt peaceful." Clayton noticed how her face changed when she spoke, like there was a pain she didn't want to describe in detail. She wasn't hiding, she was just careful. "You looked more tired than hungry," Clayton said after a thoughtful pause. "Food helps, but I think you needed rest more than anything." She lowered her eyes slightly. "You're right. I'm tired in ways that sleep alone can't fix." Her words were soft, but they carried truth. Clayton didn't ask what she meant. He could tell she carried a story inside her, and forcing it out would be the wrong thing to do. Instead, he spoke calmly. "You can stay on the porch for tonight," he said. "There's shelter, and it's safe. I'll bring out another blanket if you need it." Mira looked at him with gratitude that shone even in the dim lantern light. "Thank you. You don't even know me, but you're helping me more than anyone has in a long time." Clayton didn't know what to say to that, so he simply nodded. He wasn't used to praise. He wasn't doing anything special in his eyes, just treating someone kindly. For a while, they sat in silence again, watching the sky turn darker. The moon climbed higher, casting a silver glow across the ranch. Mira pulled the blanket closer and took a slow breath, as if trying to steady her thoughts. "I didn't only come here because of hunger," she finally said, her voice quiet but clear. Clayton glanced at her, waiting patiently. "I came because I needed a place where I could stop running," she whispered. "Even if it was just for a little while." He didn't ask what she was running from. Instead, he said, "Everybody needs a safe place sometimes." She looked at him again, and this time, her eyes held a deeper softness. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It was trust beginning to grow. "I didn't know where else to go," she admitted. "I was walking without a plan. I just hoped I'd find someone who wouldn't turn me away." "You found that," he said simply. Mira smiled gently, a small, tired smile, but one filled with real emotion. She wasn't used to such calm acceptance from a stranger. She had spent days around people who barely looked at her or brushed her aside. Here on this quiet ranch, someone had seen her as human again. "Do you mind if I ask something?" she said softly. "Go ahead. Why did you help me?" Her voice held honest confusion. Most people don't stop for strangers. Clayton thought for a moment. He wasn't always good at explaining his feelings, but he tried. "Because someone helped me once," he finally said. "Long time ago. When I needed it but didn't ask. I never forgot that moment. So I help when I can." Mira listened closely. She could tell he meant every word. His kindness came from experience, not from wanting something in return. "That's rare," she said quietly. Clayton shook his head. "Kindness shouldn't be rare. But the world changes people. Makes them forget." She nodded slowly. His simple words felt heavy with truth. As they sat together, the night deepened, and the ranch grew even quieter. Mira wrapped the blanket tightly around her shoulders. The tiredness in her eyes began to ease, not because she had slept, but because she finally felt safe enough to rest her thoughts. "Do you have anyone waiting for you back where you came from?" Clayton asked, trying to understand her situation without pushing too hard. Mira hesitated. "Not really," she said at last. "People were around me, but it didn't feel like anyone was truly there." He understood that. Sometimes being surrounded by people could feel lonelier than being alone. I guess I was hungry for more than food, she said softly. I was hungry for kindness. For someone to listen. For a place where I could breathe. Clayton didn't reply right away. Instead, he looked out into the darkness, thinking about how small acts can mean so much to someone who has been carrying silent struggles. You're safe here tonight, he said simply. That's all that matters right now. Mira felt tears press gently behind her eyes, not tears of sadness, but of relief. She wasn't used to being seen so clearly without being judged. She took a slow breath and whispered, "Thank you, Clayton." "Really?" He tipped his hat slightly. "You're welcome." The night breeze grew cooler. Clayton stood and walked inside briefly, returning with a second blanket. He placed it near her gently. Mira looked up at him with gratitude she couldn't fully express. "You'll sleep better with that," he said. She nodded, taking the blanket slowly. "You turning in?" she asked politely. "In a bit," he replied. "Just gotta check on the horses." Mira watched him walk toward the barn, his steady steps echoing softly across the land. She admired how calm he seemed, how grounded and quiet, in a world where she had felt invisible, unwanted, or hurried. This cowboy offered something different, peace. She looked out at the stars again and whispered to herself, "Maybe I found the right place by accident." But somewhere deep inside, she knew it wasn't an accident. Sometimes life led people exactly where they needed to be, just when they needed it the most. And tonight, that place was this quiet ranch, with a cowboy who thought she wanted only food, yet offered her exactly what she was starving for. Kindness, safety, and a quiet moment to breathe. Mira woke up the next morning to the gentle sound of birds singing near the porch. The air was fresh and cool, carrying the soft scent of morning dew. She blinked a few times, surprised by how deeply she had slept. It had been many nights since she had rested without fear or tension. The blanket Clayton had given her was still wrapped around her shoulders, warm and comforting. For a moment, she forgot where she was, but then she saw the wide-open fields, the wooden fences, and the quiet ranch house behind her. She remembered the kindness she had received, kindness she had not expected. She stretched her stiff limbs and glanced around. Clayton was already awake, working near the barn. He was carrying a bucket of water, guiding it toward the horses. His movements were steady and thoughtful, as if he had done this same routine every morning for years. Mira stood up slowly, clutching the blanket. She watched him for a while, admiring the calmness he carried. Clayton noticed her after a few minutes and gave a small nod. "Mornin'," he called out. "Good morning," she replied, her voice still soft from sleep. "Hope you got some rest," he said, placing the bucket down. "I did," she said sincerely. "More than I expected. Thank you." Clayton didn't say anything for a moment, but there was a gentle expression in his eyes. He motioned toward the small table near the porch. "I made some tea. It's warm if you want some." "Tade." Mira smiled gratefully and walked over. The tin cup was still steaming. She wrapped her hands around it and took a small sip. The warmth spread through her body, reminding her how long it had been since she felt simple comfort like this. Clayton wiped his hands on a cloth and came to sit on the porch steps. Mira joined him, sipping her tea slowly. "You look a little lighter today," he said quietly. "I feel a little lighter today," she replied. But after a brief, peaceful silence, her expression changed. A shadow of worry crossed her face, as if a memory suddenly returned. Clayton noticed, but he didn't interrupt her thoughts. He waited, giving her space to speak if she chose to. "Clayton," she said finally, her fingers trembling slightly around the cup. "There's something I should tell you." He looked at her calmly. "You can tell me whatever you want." Quote. She took a breath, gathering courage. "I didn't end up here because I was just wandering around. I left somewhere. Somewhere that no longer felt safe for me." Clayton didn't move. He listened carefully, his eyes gentle and steady. "I didn't want to keep running," she continued. "But I didn't have a choice. I tried to stay strong, to handle things, but It reached a point where I couldn't anymore. So I walked away. She paused again, her eyes lowering. Clayton didn't push her to continue. He knew that sharing personal struggles required trust. I wasn't running from anything dangerous, she clarified softly. Nothing like that. But I was living in a place where I felt invisible. I did everything I could to be heard. But no one listened. No one cared. I felt trapped in a life that was draining me day by day. She swallowed hard, her voice shaking slightly. I reached a point where I felt like I was starving not just for food, but for kindness, understanding, peace. Anything that reminded me I mattered. Clayton's jaw tightened slightly, not from anger at her, but from realizing how heavy her burden must have been. I left quietly, she said. I didn't know where I was going. I just walked. Days passed, and I kept walking. Some people along the way were cold. Some ignored me. Some didn't even look at me, and I kept thinking maybe the world didn't have a place for me at all. You were wrong about that, Clayton said gently. There's always a place for someone who's honest and kind. His voice was calm, but firm. It made Mira's eyes warm with emotion. It had been a very long time since anyone had spoken to her like that. I'm not proud of leaving, she whispered. But staying felt worse. I needed to find a moment to breathe. I needed to feel human again. Clayton nodded. You did what you had to do. Sometimes walking away is the bravest thing a person can do. She looked at him, surprised by his understanding. Most people would have judged her. But Clayton didn't judge. He simply listened, as if her story mattered. I didn't come to your gate just because I was hungry for food, she said. I came because I was starved for kindness. I needed someone to treat me like a person again. Someone to remind me that the world isn't always cold. Clayton leaned back slightly and rested his hands on his knees. Mira, you were right to seek that. No one should have to live without feeling safe or respected. She breathed out slowly, as if his words gave her permission to let go of some of the weight she carried. I didn't know if you would help me, she confessed. I was afraid you might turn me away like others did. Clayton shook his head. I wouldn't do that. I understand that now, she said softly. There was another quiet moment. Not heavy, just thoughtful. Clayton finally said, You know, when you came to the gate yesterday, I thought you just needed food. But now, I see there was more behind those tired eyes. Mira lowered her gaze. I didn't want to burden anyone with my story. I just hoped someone would see that I needed a bit of kindness. That's not a burden, Clayton said. It's what makes us human, caring for each other. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. Not many people think like you, he shrugged lightly. Life taught me to pay attention to what someone isn't saying. Sometimes the quiet speaks louder than words. Mira nodded slowly. You're right. Sometimes we hide our struggles because we think no one will understand. Clayton stood up and walked to the railing of the porch. He looked out at the fields, thinking about what she had shared. You've been strong for a long time, Mira. Maybe too long. She stood beside him, the sunlight warming her face. Sometimes, being strong feels like the only choice. Maybe, Clayton agreed. But letting yourself rest, that's strength too. Those simple words reached deep inside her. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling tears she didn't want to show. Not tears of sadness, but of relief, of being understood at last. I didn't expect to open up like this, she said quietly. Sometimes, the right place brings out the truth, Clayton replied. Maybe this ranch is that place, she whispered. Clayton didn't argue. He knew that sometimes people found the peace they were searching for in the most unexpected places. They spent the next hour walking around the ranch. Clayton showed her the horses, the vegetable garden, the old oak tree that his parents had planted together. Mira listened with interest, feeling lighter with each step. For the first time in many days, her mind didn't feel crowded with worry. You speak about this place with love, she said. It raised me, he replied simply, and now it's helping me. she said softly. Clayton looked at her. Maybe that's what this land is for. To give people a moment of peace. Mira smiled gently. You've given me more than a moment. He didn't respond, but his silence held understanding. As the sun climbed higher, Mira felt a quiet strength returning to her, a strength she thought she had lost. She still didn't know where her journey would lead next, but she knew one thing. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't running. She was standing still, breathing, and healing. And all because a cowboy thought she wanted only food but gave her the kindness her heart had been starving for. The sun rose gently over the ranch the next morning, spreading a soft, golden light across the fields. The air carried a cool freshness that always came before the day grew warm. Mira stepped out onto the porch and looked around. She felt more rested than she had in months. The peaceful silence of the ranch filled her chest with calm. Clayton was already awake, as usual. He was feeding the horses, moving with steady and patient steps. Every morning seemed to start this way for him, with routine, purpose, and quiet strength. Mira watched him from a distance, feeling grateful for everything he had done. She knew she had stayed longer than she intended, but something inside her didn't want to rush away from this peaceful place. Clayton noticed her standing near the porch and raised a hand in greeting. Mira walked toward him slowly. "Morning," she said softly. "Mornin'," he replied. "Sleep all right?" "It was peaceful," she said. "Thank you again for letting me stay." Clayton nodded. "No trouble. You needed a place to rest. Anyone would have done the same." But Mira knew that wasn't true. She had met many people during her journey, people who looked away, people who hurried past her, people who spoke to her without warmth. Not many had offered kindness with no questions asked. Clayton was different. His simple nature hid a big heart. She picked up a handful of hay and gently offered it to one of the horses. The horse nuzzled her palm, and Mira let out a soft laugh. "They're beautiful," she said. "They're good company," Clayton replied. "Quiet. Honest." Mira nodded, understanding more than she said. The horses were like Clayton, calm, steady, and comforting without saying much. They worked together for a little while, feeding the animals and checking the fences. The morning passed peacefully. For Mira, even small tasks felt meaningful because they made her feel included instead of invisible. After finishing the morning chores, they walked toward the porch. Clayton poured tea into 2 cups and handed one to her. They sat down, letting the soft breeze brush past them. "I'll be honest, Clayton," Mira said quietly, holding her cup with both hands. "I don't know what my next step is yet. I don't have a clear plan." Clayton didn't look surprised. "Takes time to figure those things out. I feel stronger than before," she continued, "but I don't know where I belong anymore." Clayton stared out at the fields for a moment. Sometimes a person's path isn't straight. Sometimes you need to stop for a while before you see it clearly. Mira listened carefully. His voice was steady and sincere, and the truth in his words comforted her. "You don't have to decide everything today," he added. "You've been carrying a lot. Give yourself time." "Clayton, when for morning today," she breathed out softly. His calm advice made her shoulders relax. "Clayton," she said gently, "you've helped me more than you realize. You gave me a place to rest, food to eat, and a moment to feel safe. I can't thank you enough." He shook his head lightly. "You don't owe me anything. Kindness isn't a trade." His simple words made her chest warm. Not many people lived by that belief anymore. The hours passed quietly. Mira helped around the ranch, sweeping the porch, folding blankets, and carrying small tools. She felt useful, something she hadn't felt in a long time. When the afternoon sun began to lower, Clayton sat on the porch steps, watching the horizon. Mira joined him, sitting close but not too close. "Clayton," she said softly, "there's something I want to tell you." He looked at her patiently. "You didn't just give me food or shelter," she said. "You gave me something I had been searching for. Something I thought I would never find." "What's that?" he asked. "Kindness without conditions," she replied. "A place where I felt safe to breathe." A moment where I wasn't afraid or pressured. That's what I was really hungry for. Clayton didn't smile often, but hearing her words brought a gentle warmth to his face. Well, he said quietly, I'm glad you found a bit of peace here. She nodded slowly. I did. More than a bit. The sky was turning orange and pink as evening approached. The ranch looked even more beautiful under the soft colors. Mira felt a calm she didn't want to lose. I know I can't stay forever, she said softly. But I'll never forget this place. Clayton didn't reply immediately. He looked at her with thoughtful eyes. You can stay as long as you need, he said. No rush. No pressure. Mira felt a quiet ache in her heart. She knew he meant it. He wasn't offering out of pity. He genuinely cared. That means more to me than you know, she whispered. Clayton rested his hands on his knees. This ranch feels different with you here, he admitted. Mira looked at him with surprise. Different how? 1. Quieter, he said. But in a good way. Softer. Livelier, I suppose. A soft smile formed on her face. I didn't think I made any difference. You did, he said simply. His honesty touched her deeply. As the evening air grew cooler, they walked toward the field again, watching the sky fade into deeper colors. Mira breathed slowly, absorbing the peaceful atmosphere. She thought of the long road she had walked, the loneliness she had felt, and the fear she had carried. Then she thought about how differently she felt now. Clayton, she said, breaking the quiet. Do you ever feel lonely living out here? Sometimes, he replied honestly. But I'm used to it. Does it ever bother you? She asked gently. It used to, he said. But not lately. Mira looked at him with curious eyes. Why not lately? Clayton glanced at her in the soft fading light. Because you've been here. Her breath caught slightly. She hadn't expected that. His tone was calm. Not dramatic. But the meaning behind his words was sincere. You don't have to say things like that to make me feel better, she whispered. I'm not, he said firmly. I'm saying it because it's true. Mira looked away, feeling emotion rise within her. Not sadness, something else. A kind of gentle connection she had never expected to find on her journey. She whispered, You've made me feel seen again. That's how people should feel, he replied. Night slowly settled in, wrapping the ranch in a soft darkness. The lantern glowed warmly near the porch. Clayton and Mira sat quietly side by side, sharing a peaceful moment that felt timeless. After a while, Mira spoke again. I think I needed this more than anything, more than food, more than direction. I needed to feel like I mattered to someone, even if just a little. Clayton turned toward her. You matter, he said simply. To yourself first. And to the world. Don't forget that. Her eyes softened with emotion. She didn't cry, but she felt the weight in her chest melt gently. It was the first time in a long time someone had spoken to her with such sincerity. Thank you, Clayton, she whispered again, unable to say anything else. He nodded lightly. The sky grew full of stars, bright and clear. Mira leaned back slightly, breathing deeply. She no longer felt like a traveler running away from her life. She felt like a person healing. Slowly, but surely. And as she watched the stars beside Clayton, she realized something important. Sometimes, the most unexpected places become the turning point in a person's life. Clayton had thought she came to his gate only for food. But her true hunger was for peace, kindness, and a reminder that the world still held good hearts. And she found all of that here. As the night settled, they sat quietly together, knowing that their paths had crossed for a reason. Both of them had been changed gently, quietly, deeply by the simple kindness shared between a tired traveler and a humble cowboy. And in that peaceful moment, they understood one thing. Sometimes the right person appears at exactly the right time, and even a single act of kindness can change the direction of a life.